Rule number 2 is, treat yourself like you're someone that you care about. See, I read this piece of work by Jung a long while back. It was a meditation on the injunction to treat your neighbor as you would like to be treated. Something like that. And what Jung pointed out, which I really liked, was that that wasn't an injunction to be nice to other people. It was an invitation to reciprocity. It was something like this: it's like, you should figure out how you would like to be treated. Like you were taking care of yourself. Not how you would like people to respond to you. It's more important than that. It's like, imagine you had a child that you really cared for. And someone said, people will treat this child exactly like you want them to, but you have to figure out what that is. And so then you'd have to sit down for like a month, and you'd think, okay, well, how do you want your child to be treated? You don't want everyone just to be nice to him, you know. You want people to challenge him, and you want people to discipline him, and you want people to tell him when he's wrong. It's like, you don't just want everyone to be nice. That's pathetic. It's pathetic. There's no challenge in that. And so, well, you want to treat other people like you would like to be treated. Well, then you have to figure out, how would you like to be treated? And while you'd like people to fawn all over you and just lay everything at your feet, it's like, no, that's not something you'd wish for someone that you were taking care of. Then there's an additional problem, which is, it's often the case that people will treat other people better than they treat themselves. That happens extremely frequently. So one of the things I pointed out in chapter 2 was that if you have a dog, and you take him to a vet, and the vet gives you the prescription medicine, you'll go buy the medicine, and you'll give it to the dog, and you'll do it properly. But if you go yourself to a doctor, and you get a prescription, there's a 30% chance you won't even pick up the medication. And if you do, there's a 50% chance that you won't administer it to yourself properly. And so I really thought about that. When I first came across that statistic, it was another one of those little facts, and I thought, what the hell's up with that? It's like, you'll do it for your dog, so obviously you'll do it for something you care about, and you're conscientious enough so you'll actually do it, so like, why wouldn't you do it for you? Your dog likes you, you know, even your dog would rather that you did, but you don't. And it's not only because they don't take care of themselves, there's some skepticism about doctors, but you could be just as skeptical about the vet. So, it's a deep meditation, I would say, and what I've done with these rules is, they're very simple rules, and they're kind of comical and tongue-in-cheek in some ways, but what I've tried to do is pull them apart and show what's underneath them and to go down as deep as I possibly can. And in Rule 2 it's a bit of a meditation on why people don't like themselves very much, and I think there's two reasons really, and one is that we're fragile and damageable and imperfect in multiple dimensions all the time, and that often just gets worse. Lots of things get worse as you get old, for example, so it's not necessarily that easy for a self-conscious being, who's extraordinarily aware of his or her own fragility, but not just fragility, foolishness and errors, like, you know yourself better than anyone else knows you, and, you might have a certain amount of dislike for someone you know because of something they did, but you know everything you did. Jesus, that's a drag, man, you have to carry that along behind. It's like, really, I did that, And then, so there's that. It's like you're weak and kind of useless and prone to temptation. And all those things, that just shouldn't be that way. And then, you're also capable of pretty vicious acts of malevolence. And so you also know that about yourself. And so, it's a real existential question for people. It's like, why the hell should you take care of something as sorry and wretched as you are? And that's really what the chapter's about. It's, first of all, yes, you're pretty useless and terrible, but so is everyone else. And that's actually an existential question. Existential problem, right? And what I mean by that, it's a problem that every human being has always had and always will. So it's not just you. It's a universal problem. And there's an answer to that. One of them is to, love the sinner but hate the sin. It's something like that. Despite the fact that you're not all that you could be, the proper attitude to have towards yourself is the attitude that you would have towards someone that you genuinely cared for. And that it's incumbent on you to act as if you genuinely care for yourself. Just like you would act towards someone that you actually cared about, some other person. And so it's a reversal in some sense of the golden rule, right? And it's a discussion of why that's necessary. And also, more than that, it's a discussion of why you have a moral obligation to do that. It's not just that you should because it would be better for you. It's, you actually have a moral obligation to do that, I think. Because you make the world a much worse place if you don't take care of yourself. So you should bloody well take care of yourself, you know. Because it's partly because you have something valuable to bring into the world. That's the thing about being an individual. It's the thing that Western civilization has always recognized. That as an individual, you have a light that you have to bring into the world. And that if you don't bring it into the world is a dimmer place. And that's a bad thing, because when the world is a dim place, it can get very, very, very dark. And so it's necessary, not just so that you feel better, not just so that you're a number one lobster, none of those things. You need to take care of yourself, because you're in the best position to do that. And it's necessary for you to take care of yourself. Despite the fact that we're mortal and vulnerable and self-conscious and capable, not only capable of doing terrible things, but actually do them. Despite all that, you still have that responsibility regardless of your inadequacies and your malevolence, which you know. I'm sure you have many inadequacies and no shortage of malevolence, just like everyone else, regardless of that you have a moral obligation, so that would be a responsibility to assume that despite all evidence that there's actually something of intrinsic worth about you, and that as a consequence you're duty bound to treat yourself like that is true. And then it turns out that if you do that well, then your life gets better, and I don't mean happier exactly. Although I would say it gets happier, I mean it gets richer and more meaningful and deeper and more worthwhile, and you become more educated and you become wiser and you treat yourself with more respect, and you're a better model for other people, and you're a better father or a better sister or a better mother, whatever it happens to be. And you're less ridden by that guilt that gnaws at you and shame that's there otherwise saying, you're not what you could be. You're not what you could be. And that's a hell of a voice to get rid of, and it's certainly not one that's easy to ignore. So that idea that there's something divine, let's say, that resides within you of ultimate worth, even as a philosophical statement or a psychological statement rather than a metaphysical statement. It seems to be a precondition for establishing properly harmonious relationships with yourself, man. That's worth thinking about a lot. You know, you could think that in some sense you just own yourself, you know you, because people do kind of make that claim, especially when they're trying to justify, for example, their right to suicide. That, you know, it's your life, it's your body, you're yours to do what you will with. And, if that was true, well then, it would seem to me that life would be a lot more straightforward. Because you would just tell yourself things that you would instantly obey and believe. So, first of all, you'd tell yourself all the things that you were going to do, and then you'd just run off and do them. Which you don't, obviously. Because it's much more difficult than that. And then you'd also say, well, enough of the guilt, and the shame, and the negative emotion, and the disillusionment, and the vengefulness, and all those things that make life hard. The self-recrimination, it's like, what the hell do we need that for? And if we're masters of our own destiny, and owners of our own fate, then why can't we just command to ourselves that be dispensed with? And, like, that doesn't work. I've never seen anybody able to do that. So, I mean, you can fool yourself for very brief periods of time into thinking that might work, but it doesn't work, and that's strange. And this is one of the reasons I love the psychoanalysts, because they were really the people, apart from the religious types, who figured out that whatever you are, you're not a unitary spirit that's under your own dominion. You know, you're something like a loose unity of a multiplicity of spirits, many of which are doing their own thing, which you're striving to bring into some form of unity. But even that unity isn't something that's under your control in any real sense. It's a unity that has its own nature that you have to exist in relationship to, and I would also say that that's one of the things that keeps people's feet firmly on the ground, because otherwise it's easy to become egotistical and narcissistic. You know, if you think that you're the center of your own being, you know, in some fundamental sense, then you're only beholden to yourself. You're sort of a self-created creature. Perhaps you could think about it that way. It doesn't work like that. It's like the ideal that constitutes the unity that you might become then sort of manifests itself as something that you could strive toward but aren't, and it also serves as a judge. It's the thing that keeps you up at night saying, you know, there's some things you're just not attending to and you should get at it because life is short and there's no shortage of trouble that you might end up in, and a wise person would attend to the dictates of his conscience and lay out his actions in the world according to what he knows to be true and correct.